Well, today is Sunday, and I thought while it's quiet, I am going to bring the Corolla's new engine down the workshop. Basically, I've never really shown this before, even though I've owned it for about a year and a half. It might look like a dusty, dirty piece of shit, because to be fair, it is at the moment, but inside this not very clean looking thing, a lot of this dust is because it lived under a cover in a body shop. And if anybody knows how dusty, well, what anything's like when it's in a body shop, everything gets covered in fucking dust. So while this looks pretty grotty, this is actually a fully forged and low mile 3S-GTE, and the gearbox is again a low mile, just rebuilt 3S-GTE box with an MR2 turbo one with I can't remember, a twin or a triple, I think a triple plate clutch. The engine has got HKS cams, valve springs, I think it's like CP pistons, forget which rods. So yeah, it's a proper engine. My plan was today to bring it over, which I just have. It's bloody heavy, mine. Jesus Christ, it's I've been spoilt with these Mercedes V8s that are real light, and the Volvo red blocks, which are, everyone thinks are heavy because they're Volvos, but they're not. They're actually really light. This thing weighs a fucking ton. Jesus Christ, I've proper done my back in taking this. But anyway, I got it here, all good. The plan was to get the engine crane, take it out, and basically inspect it. And it's gonna need not a full strip down, but I want to I'll probably take the sump and cam cover off. I'm gonna change the cam belt, and somebody's borrowed the engine crane, so it was a completely wasted journey and I can't get it out. And because of Sunday, I chose Sunday because I thought, oh, it'll be nice and quiet, won't, you know, no cars, because around here it's usually real fucking busy because all the businesses, because it's an industrial estate. Today, Sundays are super dead because everything's closed. But when somebody's borrowed the engine crane and they're not here because it's one of our friend's garage next door, I think they've borrowed it, I can't get it back off them because they're not here today. It's the next day and the crane is back. So the engine's out and here it is, looking very dusty and horrible because it's been sat in a body shop for ages, but it's very low mile, very high spec, and pretty bloody fancy. It's a shame this HKS cam belt has to be changed, because A, it looks cool, and B, it's probably only done a few thousand miles, but it's done those few thousand miles in probably about 10 years, so the belt is old, so I'm gonna have to change it. As much as I don't normally want to sort of spend money on like things just because it looks pretty, like, those cam belts do look ace, so I might end up buying a new HKS one rather than a normal Gates one or whatever. But I don't know, we'll see. But my first job, I'd say, is to give it a right good clean, because it's dusty as hell and just pretty shitty, and then go from there. But yeah, I know the engine, and it's good, and it's a big spec. I'll go through the spec in a minute. But yeah, first things first, it needs a clean because it looks pretty crap just because of all the dust. Well, it's a couple hours later, as you can maybe tell, because it's pretty much dark. I've stripped down the engine just to the level that I can give everything a look over. I'll probably put it on an engine stand and whip the sump off, but that can wait for another day. But I'll show you what we got so far. That's the standard inlet manifold. Bit dusty, but it's been like polished in the past. It's not a bad design. Like the ports, you know, the runner length's pretty good. The ports are pretty massive. It's not too bad at all. It's the same one as on my Corolla, apart from that front bit on this one is a bit nicer than the one on the Corolla. I don't know if that's standard off something else or what, but my Corolla one's a bit different to that and not as nice. I prefer this one. What the difference is, I'm not sure. Going on to the engine, what we have is a fancy OS-Giken multi-plate clutch. I don't know if it's twin or triple. I'm going with, it's hard to be 100% sure, but I reckon that's twin. And obviously super light flywheel that goes with it. I whipped the cam cover off because obviously that tells a lot of stories. And as you can see, I mean, I haven't even wiped this. It is fucking mint. As you saw before, HKS cam pulleys, HKS timing belt, which, as nice as it is, I'm gonna have to change it because this, obviously, while it's done next to no miles, it's old. Head is, as you can probably tell, mint. The cams are, I don't know if you can read that, but the HKS cams, just like the pulleys, and as you can maybe see there, it's ARP head studs. It's got an MLS head gasket. Wolf Cats, whoever they are, fuel rail. The injectors are, I can't remember the brand, but they're 11 or 1200 cc injectors. And yeah, that's obviously all you can see here. But seeing as I know the spec, and you know why I know the spec of this car? Because A, I know the owner, well, the old owner of this engine, and B, I featured this car in Redline. I wrote the feature on this engine. The car that was this engine was originally built for. It was the very last cover car for the very last issue of Redline. A mental 600 plus horsepower MR2 turbo. And yeah, this is the engine. And unfortunately, it had a crash, and so the engine didn't live much longer than that feature, unfortunately. Well, the car didn't. The engine was kept by the owner to do something else with, because obviously it was mega and he spent a fortune on it and he loved it. But he never really got round to it, and when my Corolla engine knackered up, I asked him, because I knew he still owned it, he told me before. And, you know, I said, what are you doing with it? And he's like, oh, I was keeping it, but, you know, fuck it. If you want it, then buy it off me. So I did. And I've owned this fucking about a year and a half. But I've just had it in storage until now. So yeah, this is a 3S-GTE, as I'm sure you know. It was fully blueprinted and balanced engine. It's got 85.5 mil, 8.5:1 compression, CP forged pistons, Carrillo H-beam rods, Carrillo conrod bolts. What else has it got? Ported and polished inlet manifold, yeah, we know that. HKS 264 cams, HKS valve springs, HKS pulleys, obviously. Cometic head gasket, Cometic bottom end gasket set, ARP head studs, ARP main studs, ARP flywheel bolts, ACL bearings, ACL thrust washers. What else has it got? TRD, low temp thermostat, you know, little things like that. Obviously Magnacore leads, which you probably would have seen. Yeah, the Grady oil cap. Yeah, according to this, it's Delphi 1100cc injectors. So yeah, that's what they are. And yeah, it had in that car an 8,500 RPM rev limit, which is plenty for me. With the turbo I'm gonna run, I don't think it needs to go as far as 8.5. I'd love it if it does, if it, you know, made power that far through. But even if it made power to bloody 7.5, that'd be great. I'm sure it will do 7.5, but I think it'd be the turbo that would be running out of puff at that high RPM rather than the engine itself. But yeah, and yeah, all good. As far as I understand, it's an unported head, but these heads flow great, so that would be why. And yeah, it made 500 brake at 22 psi, 550 brake at 29, and 600-ish at 36 on the old engine. That's pump fuel. And it was a little tiny GT35 with 82 exhaust housings, so not a big turbo. The gearbox is the normal rev-free MR2 turbo gearbox, E153 or whatever they're called, but it was rebuilt, you know, the same time as the engine. It's done very little miles, and it's got rated gear shift bearings, whatever bloody hell they are. Obviously OS-Giken it says OS-Giken billet multi-plate carbon ceramic clutch, OS-Giken flywheel. Probably the most useful thing for me, seeing as it's going in a front drive car that was obviously traction limited, is it's got a CAS two-way diff in it. Generally, a two-way in a fucking front wheel drive car isn't the best thing in the world for handling, according to most people, but it's fucking fine. I'm absolutely fine with that. I would run a welded diff in a front drive car, it wouldn't bother me. I always run welders in rear wheel drives and love it. And yeah, front drive, it's a lot worse, but it don't bother me. So yeah, CAS two-way is probably my favourite thing of this. My current gearbox in the Corolla has got a TRD diff in it. So yeah, that's decent, but I think that's a Torsen, I can't remember. But this is much more serious, as is this engine. But yeah, as you can see, very fresh and clean. You know, unmarked cam lobes and so on, where it's not had a hard life at all. Wow, it's had a fairly hard life, it's just not done that many miles. And it was on a Stav-Tech ECU, which is pretty fucking top of the range, big money, with like every safety mechanism in the world sorted with it. So, you know, great knock control, great everything. And in fact, that was part of the reason he kept it, because obviously he crashed the car, and they was like, obviously got to wonder if the engine was all right. But luckily, thanks to Stav-Tech and data logging, I mean, it had every sensor hooked up. They checked the data logging, and obviously it shows, well, not obviously, but on this car, even oil temperature and oil pressure is set on the ECU, and if it goes below a certain level of oil pressure, it turns the car off. And lo and behold, on the data logs, at every point while the car was running, the fuel pressure was nice and high, and yeah, and then the engine was shut off. So thankfully the crash didn't cause any kind of oil starvation or anything, so good times. And amazingly, if you saw the state of the car, even though it had a dash dodger cage, which according to the internet is like more dangerous than not having a cage, which is bullshit, it had one of those Cusco dash dodger cages in it, and if it wasn't for that cage, he'd be dead. Literally, if you saw the state of the car, he would be dead if it weren't for that cage. So yeah, they are better than having no cage, no matter what dickheads on the internet with no real experience of it reckon. But anyway, that's not important, because that car's long gone and the engine's mine, as is the box. So yeah, all good so far. I really should, I suppose, it's almost kind of like no point because I know, but I suppose I should take the sump off one of these days and look. But generally, all it mostly needs is a good old fucking clean and maybe a good paint, because obviously it's all a bit old and crappy and painty, you know, flaky paint and shit, because it's all ancient and has sat around for ages. I'll put a new cam belt on it, new cam cover gasket and stuff, because the old one that I took off was a bit shitty, so I'm not going to reuse it. And yeah, new fluids, and fucking goes in the Corolla. Good times. So yeah, I've tied it up for the night, and this can stay here till the morning. Not entirely sure where I'm going to put it yet, and I haven't got any spare engine stands at the moment, because I've got two pretty much complete Volvo red blocks on the two, and one bottom end which doesn't need to be on there, so I could probably take that off, and maybe I'll put this on there to do the cam belt and have a look at it in the sump. I don't know, I might not even bother. I'll do the cam belt, of course, but I might not even do the sump, you know. I don't know. I will speak to Thomas about it tomorrow. He's got ridiculous amounts of experience with everything, so I trust his judgment there. So yeah, all good, and hopefully next time you see this engine, the Corolla will also be here. But yeah, we will see.